Okay, folks, thanks very much, and thanks for the invite to come along and speak at your conference this afternoon. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm actually delighted to be standing in a room like this where you've got 4 walls of screens just to look at. It's fantastic. And look up at the sky and see the stars. It's brilliant. I've been asked to speak a little bit about cyber resilience and what that looks like in terms of our being prepared to respond and recover from the various cyber attacks that are out there. Now, my background is law enforcement, so I'm not a techie. I'm not going to speak to you in tech speak, but hopefully I'm going to give you some really good practical takeaways that you can go back to your organisations with. But before I start, can I have a show of hands, please? How many people are members of CISP, the Cyber Security Information Sharing Partnership? Not one. What about one? What? Fantastic. What about Cyber Essentials? How many organisations have been through Cyber Essentials, got the badge? One. That doesn't really surprise me because generally speaking, there is a lack of awareness of both schemes, not only in Scotland, but across the wider UK as well. And as a consequence of that, and to support the Scottish Government's cyber resilience strategy, I was appointed as the CISP coordinator for Scotland a couple of years ago. And I'm working very closely with the Scottish Government, the Police Scotland and the National Cyber Security Centre in London. And I'm aligned to the Scottish Business Resilience Centre, SBRC, who are now located in Linlithgow. And my role, along with others, is to go out and promote these schemes to businesses across all sectors in Scotland, but with a focus on SMEs, the private sector. Hence, I'm aligned to the SBRC. So why are we doing this? Well, quite simply, and we've heard a lot about it today, the growth of the internet has been massive. It's the biggest social and technological development in recent times, which is great because we're all communicating across the world. We're getting access to information at a touch of a button, and all our devices are increasingly become connected to this Internet of Things that we heard about earlier on today. But as our reliance on the internet increases, so too does the threat of internet and cyber-related crimes. And to quote Charles Darwin there, we all need to be far more responsive to change. In other words, we need to be responsive and adapt to that changing cyber threat landscape, because if we don't, we run the risk of sleepwalking into some form of crisis. So what do I mean by that? I don't know what I mean by that. Point it this way. So I'm not going to dwell on these, but we've all seen the headlines of security breaches and hacks, NHS, Tesco Bank, Marriott hotels, Oyster card accounts in London being compromised, British Airways, all big national global companies. But let's bring it down a bit. This is a local hairdresser in Glasgow who was hacked and almost went out of business because they lost their accounts. Arran Brewery had a similar instance where they lost access to their accounts. But let's bring it down again. Individuals are being receiving emails, phishing emails, where they're trying to extort or exploit them in exchange of money. So the reason for putting that there without going through all the details is every organisation, every business, regardless of their size, what sector they're in, is at risk of some form of cyber attack unless they take precautionary measures to protect themselves. And I would suggest that the tourism industry is no different. So since taking up post a couple of years ago, what amazed me was just the scale of cyber attacks. Literally out of control, in my opinion. Now, while some of these attacks are up here in terms of requiring a level of sophistication, the vast majority of these internet-borne attacks are low-level, volume attacks that could easily be prevented. And even if they did go onto your system, the impact could be mitigated quite easily. The problem we've got, folks, is there's too many of these low-level volume attacks getting through, and as we've seen, they're hurting businesses, they're affecting their customer accounts, they're affecting their data on their organisation, and in turn that affects your revenue streams. So my message when I go out and speak to businesses, please don't wait for something to happen before you take action. There needs to be this culture shift away from reactive mitigation to more proactive training and awareness of staff. And I've put some stats up there just to give an indication of what that looks like. These are from the UK Government Cyber Security Breaches Survey. 32% of UK businesses sustained some form of attack last year. Now that's came down actually, because 2 years ago it was 46%, last year it was 43%. But if you put in context that there's 5.5 million businesses across the UK, it tells you the scale of what we're looking at. And then you break it down to what these attacks look like. So a high percentage of that are these fraudulent emails, right down to ransomware. So what I'm suggesting is we'll have this intelligence-led approach to cybersecurity. In other words, if you can understand what that changing threat landscape looks like in the cyber world, that increases your situational awareness. And when you've got that increased situational awareness, you can then make informed, good decisions as to what you're going to do to mitigate against that. Now that's great, but to be intelligence-led, you need to have good quality information intelligence. And for many organisations, including, I suspect, many people sitting in the room, that's easier said than done, because you don't have the time, you don't have the resources to go checking for that intelligence. And to be quite frank, and I suspect for many, it's not really a priority. So the National Cyber Security Centre in London have recognised that, and they've created what's called the CISP, the Cyber Security Information Sharing Partnership. Now this is essentially an online networking tool. It's housed in the NCSC in London on a secure extranet, and it gives this collaboration environment for your organisation's IT people, security people, to learn and share from each other's experiences of cyber real time. Now the good thing about CISP, it's free. There's no cost to your organisation, provided you've got your own responsibility for your own IT network within the UK. So it's a no cost to your organisation. You do need a sponsor to go on CISP, and by that, all you need is someone to vouch for who you are, who your company is, and the fact that you fit that criteria. And folks, as a CISP coordinator for Scotland, anybody in this room who's not in CISP who wants to get access, fit the criteria, then I'm more than happy to help with that. Because at the centre, within the NCSC, they've got a team of analysts who provide a significant threat assessment capabilities. So they're producing reports, they're producing alerts and advisory notices, and you get access to that through CISP. And it's really easy. You just go onto the NCSC website, onto the CISP page, and it's a simple online application form that you put in your details and myself as a sponsor. So that's the intelligence part of it. If you remember, I said that the vast majority of these internet-borne attacks are low-level, volume, unsophisticated attacks. Well, UK government, along with industry, have identified what they've called Cyber Essentials, the Cyber Essentials scheme. Now, this is essentially 5 network controls that you can put and introduce to your network that will prevent 80% of those volume attacks, and it will mitigate against the remaining 20%. And it's the baseline standard for cybersecurity within the UK, and it's recognised as that. There's 2 levels. There's Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. Cyber Essentials basically means you complete a questionnaire about what policies and procedures you've got in for your IT. And then an independent IT company who's accredited through NCSC will come in and check that questionnaire against the standards for Cyber Essentials. If it meets the standards, you qualify for that badge. Cyber Essentials Plus is exactly the same questionnaire, but in addition to that, that independent company will come in and actually physically test part of your organisation's IT network, just to give you that added assurance. Now, if you've got these Cyber Essentials badges, you can advertise that, and you can show your customers, you can show the people you're working with that you've taken cybersecurity seriously and that you've got your house in order through good cyber hygiene. Now, there is a slight cost attributed to Cyber Essentials. It's a few £100 for Cyber Essentials and a slightly more for Cyber Essentials Plus, but a lot depends on the size of your company. There are lots of incentives and support available, but I'm not going to cover that just now because I know Aileen Lamb's going to speak about that after me, and she'll explain a bit more detail how you can get access to that funding, which will cover you getting Cyber Essentials. I mentioned these independent IT companies. There's only 28 certifying bodies located within Scotland. There's a lot more across the UK. So what the SBRC and myself have done is contacted all these companies, brought them together, and we've created this trusted partner scheme. So all these companies come together, and that list is on the SBRC website. So if you're looking for assistance for Cyber Essentials, that's the list we're signposting you for Scotland. With the caveat that we don't recommend any particular company over and above anybody else, obviously. In fact, we'd recommend you speak to 2 or 3, and geography may play a part of that. That scheme's endorsed by Police Scotland, and it's a signposting scheme. Final thing I want to finish with, folks, is talk a little bit about the National Cyber Security Centre in London. They were launched about 3 years ago, and for the first time, they have brought together 5 functions of UK government under one roof, including GCHQ. And the NCSC are now the single authoritative voice of all things cyber within the UK. And there's a real drive within the NCSC to be a bit more proactive, a bit more public-facing, which is a bit in contrast to what GCHQ used to be like. And it's part of that proactivity. They have, first of all, created their website, the NCSC website, which has a whole host of good quality advice and guidance for SMEs and a whole host of organisations. And what I really like about the website, you can tailor that information to your needs, so you can get access to information relative to an individual or families, through SMEs, right the way up to cyber professionals. So if you've not looked at that website, I would recommend you have a look at it and see what's available through that. I said that the NCSC have been very proactive, and over the last year or so, they have produced a number of free resources. Now, I'm not going to go through all them individually, we'd be here all day. I just want to signpost you to them. They're geared towards the SME market, but they can be scaled accordingly. The first one up there on the left is the Small Business Guide for Cyber Security. Now, that gives information and guidance on 5 simple measures that as an organisation you can implement relatively cost effectively, but by implementing it you will significantly enhance your cyber security. And it's things about your backups, your passwords, and what you do with removable data, that sort of thing. The board toolkit, the NCSC recognise that CEOs and senior management are really influential in terms of promoting cyber resilience across the UK, but they also recognise that many CEOs don't have that technical background or expertise. So they've created this toolkit specifically designed for CEOs so that they can start having discussions with their own IT department and start asking the right questions so they can get the assurances that their organisation is up to speed. The Small Business Guide Response and Recovery was launched 2 months ago, and it basically gives you practical advice on how to prepare your response and plan your recovery to a cyber incident. And it's a 5-point plan that looks at having an incident response plan in place, how to safeguard your critical information and your sensitive data, how to identify an attack when it's taking place, what you do to respond to it, and then look at your business continuity thereafter and how do you recover from it. Really good practical advice. The last 2 things I'm going to mention are actually training packages. The first one is Stay Safe Online, top tips for staff. NCSC have been engaging with SMEs, and one of the key findings through that engagement was lots of organisations were saying, we know cyber security is important, but how do we get that message across to our staff? So NCSC have created this online e-learning package, as I say, top tips for staff. It's a free resource. It consists of a short animated clip which talks through why cybersecurity is important and what to look out for an attack. And it's designed for those members of staff who have very little or no knowledge of cybersecurity. And you can access that via the NCSC website. You don't need a login, you don't have to pay anything, and you can use it as often you want, and I would recommend that to you. The final one, the exercise in the box, was launched at Cyber UK in Glasgow earlier on this year. And it's a series of cyber-related scenario exercises, again accessed through NCSC, through their online portal. And it's designed for organisations to hold their own tabletop type exercises. And what's good about Exercise in the Box, apart from it being no cost, is everything you need to run that exercise is contained in the package. Right from the top of having learning objectives, participant briefing notes, facilitators notes, right down to flip charts, pens, projectors, everything you'd expect to have. And then there's all the series of exercises and injects you can put on it. So as an example, An inject might be a member of staff comes to you and says, I've lost my mobile phone, it's my work's mobile phone. So what's on that mobile phone? What can be accessed through that mobile phone? Do you have passwords on it? Is it two-factor authentication? Can you remotely track it? Can you remotely disable it? These are the questions that you start to ask. And by going through these scenarios, you can identify what's really good that your organisation's doing, but it will also identify what the gaps are. And once you've completed that exercise, you can print an automated report that will capture all that information. And for me, that then becomes an action plan moving forward for you to take forward and fill the gaps. So folks, that was a quick run through. I just want to finish with one last slide to say, if you're a CEO or a senior manager within your organisation, if you've not already done so, just ask yourself some of these questions. And I'm not going to go through them all because time's against us, but the first couple that are really important. If you've not already done so, how are you defending your organisation against all those internet-borne attacks that I talked about earlier on? And more importantly, what independent assurance have you got that you're not vulnerable from these attacks, or are you relying on your IT person saying you're not? And if you were compromised, what's your crown jewels? What are you going to lose? And what sensitive data are you going to lose that could open you up to litigation or whatever? So folks, that's me. I'm going to finish there. I'm just going to reiterate what I said at the start, is please don't wait for something to happen. That's the key message. If you wait for something to happen, then you're at risk of suffering the consequences of a cyber attack. So thanks very much for your time. It's been a pleasure being here.